Welcome back to Revamped Outdoors. My name's Elliot. Got a new mold today. I didn't get a new mold. We made it. That's what we do here. Let's go through some of the Fusion 360 design. Okay, so this is what I've come up with. This is my version of like a realistic crayfish. What I did for this is pretty simple. I actually used a real picture of a rusty crayfish. Rusty crayfish are invasive species in the Midwest here, but they're all over the place. So I used an actual rusty crayfish as the canvas on the back of Fusion 360. I put it in here and then I kind of made it a little bit more lure friendly. So by that I mean instead of having actual legs out, I put little hooks on there, so hopefully those kind of tails will pull through the water and act a little bit more like a swim, like a grub tail or something. And then I put a little bit of flare here on the outside edges of the claws instead of splitting those claws like you would traditionally on a crawfish bait, crayfish bait. I made them kind of inverted tails. The idea here is that when it pulls through the water, that it's going to be kind of swirling like you would a grub tail, but it's going to be on a crayfish body. I made this one a little bit thick. I wanted something substantial, maybe that you could either put on the back of a jig trailer or put on the back of a jig as a trailer, or you could use a Texas rig style. Basically a simple design here in Fusion, nothing really too crazy. It's actually a symmetrical body. It's not cut here or anything like that. The only thing I would kind of mention about how this works for the body portion is if you're wanting to design something that's squished down in the Z axis. So let's say I wanted this profile extruded here, and I revolve this profile. It's going to be a real big, thick cylinder. All you do then is you go up into modify and into scale. And then when you're in the scale portion of the body you want, I guess we can do it here. It doesn't really matter. We do non-uniform, and then we can actually bring this down and shrink it. If my computer doesn't freak out, which it appears to want to. So we can actually shrink that down non-uniformly. If you do it uniform, it'll take everything and just kind of shrink it smaller and smaller. We don't want to do that. We want to do it on one axis and bring it and shrink it down. So that's how I end up getting this. I'm not even sure what you would call this body, kind of like almost a median fusiform, kind of sideways shrink down. You end up just revolving this around the sketch. You'd have the sketch come down here, you revolve it that way, and then shrink it non-uniformly to the body profile you want, and then start adding sketch components. So that's what we did here. That's really the only kind of tricky thing with that. So then what you do is you come in here and you add all your sprue holes and all of that for the final mold box, and that would be right here. This is essentially all I did to this mold box was add some sprues to the end of anything that's pointy. So I did add a little bit of a hook slot here. That all you do with that is I just added a sketch on this front plane right here. So for instance, if I wanted to do it to this, it's already done, but we're going to add a offset plane here. I'm going to bring this plane into, let's say, like right here. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to get on that plane, and then I'm going to do an inspect, and I'm going to do section analysis, and that's going to bring me down to here. Now what I can do is on this plane, we say yes. Now that only shows me that section. So what we can do on this plane then is we can just like click this. I can do a create sketch here. Then we can, from this portion now, if we really wanted to, we could come in here. Let's say we wanted, I think it might be a little offset, but whatever. I'll get rid of everything I do here in a second anyway. Then we go in here, we want this maybe to be a cut. We wanted the hook slot to be a little bit deeper. So we come in here, I'm going to grab that body that I just made, and then we'll just press pull that out. So now I can do a cut operation on a press pull. It turns into an extrude, but it's press pull. Say okay, and then we have a bigger hook slot, right? So that's the same thing that I did previously to get to this point. We'll turn the constructions off and the section analysis. We'll also turn off that additional sketch because we don't need that anymore. There we go. So then the rest to prep this box for pouring is I just put in 14 millimeter poles, essentially, that just come up through the bottom on each half. I don't know where the other half, there we go. There's the other half. So this is just split in half, flipped over. I put these 14 millimeter poles up. These give me a spot for the securing bolts. So after this mold is made, what we're going to do is put bolts through it and then some knobs to hold it together. And we just need those poles in there so the silicone doesn't come in. So silicone is going to be poured into here, and then we need a way to hold those bolts onto the wooden side support structures. If you've seen my other videos, you understand this. If not, you might want to check out like Soft Plastic July episode 2. I go over how I put the wooden sides on. Nothing complicated. So then I just come back in here on the dimensions of where those posts are going to be. I just make a bracket up for it. Nothing too special here. All it is sitting on those posts. It's where the bolts are going to go. It's going to accept a 1.5 inch fender washer, and then it's going to have a 1/4 bolt that comes through here to the other side. Then I can secure that to the wooden side plate just with some small screws, right, that don't punch through the wood far enough, right? So we're going to use 1/2 inch wood with this, hopefully being a 1/4 inch thick, or we're going to use 3/4 inch wood with some 3/4 inch screws or 1/2 inch screws. Put those in there. Our bolts are going to stay in our mold body every time we pour instead of having to put new bolts in, which is a huge pain. So that's essentially it. Not a crazy design. It's a little bit of a crazy design to make sure that all these fillets work. That's the hardest part. Anytime you have complex intersections, these fillets are a little bit difficult to work with. Like something in here, they're going to intersect quite a few times, so you're going to have to try what size is going to be the right way to get it. How do I want this corner to end up from the body into the crawfish. Sorry, I'm from the north, so I say crayfish all the time, but you can't, hard to see where this comes in at and how easily, like, you want this to easily flow from one to another. You don't want it to have any kind of hard spots, so it's a little tough to mess with that fillet. It's a little larger bait, so it's one of those things. You try and design it the best that you can, the way you like the look. If it's too large, it's too large. If it's too small, it's too small. You start, restart. That's the beauty of these things. You can always print more. All right, so now that we have the mold boxes done, I've been printing these on the ANET A8 in 0.08 layer height. That's a pretty high resolution, low layer height. Creates really nice kind of rounded bodies instead of just having real thick layer lines. If you are new to 3D printing, you've been seeing kind of the ANET A8 in the space. I really like the machine, but it's taken me 1.5 years to upgrade it and to get it into that space. So just be aware that the ANET, when it comes in a stock configuration, it needs a firmware upgrade at minimum, and it needs a power supply upgrade moderately. Like that should probably be a minimum as well, because the power supply is so kind of bad from the start. It's important. Safety's important. That's what they say. It's important. It just is. Safety third, right? Safety, safety, safety. And you need to do a lot of 3D printed upgrades and different things to get it to where you want it. But after you get it to where you want it, it's my go-to machine. I haven't had a problem with it in 2.5 years. It's always there for me to print with. So that's what I use. I printed this one in PLA. And so now I guess we'll prep the mold and pour it. So this is the same process that I've used in previous episodes, especially in episode 2 of Soft Plastic July. I go through this in more detail. But all I'm going to do with the mold is I'm going to pour in some rice to find the volume. Then I'm going to pour in some mold release for when we pour the silicone in. I'm going to take the rice volume and I'm going to transfer that to a clear cup. That's going to tell me how much weight per volume of the silicone I need. So I'm going to mark it on a line with pour the rice in, mark a line out, pour the silicone up to that. I'm going to make sure I record or remember the weight of that. Then I'm going to do 2 of those cups because I need 2 halves of this mold. I make the molds the same size on either side, so I know the volume is going to be the same. Then I mix up the silicone with the activator, so part A and part B. with mold max 60. Part A is 100, and part B is 3, so it's a 3 to 100. So I mix that up, then I put it into a vacuum chamber to get rid of most of the air bubbles. I'm going to throw it on to both sides of the mold, and I'm going to let that set up for 24 hours. Then after 24 hours, we're ready to try and shoot the mold. So we take it apart. I put on the sides, the wooden plank sides. So all I'm doing here is I'm just cutting out some 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch plywood, depending on what you have. I'm running the bolts through the areas where we had our spacers in the mold themselves, putting the bracket on to hold the bolts in, and then I've just 3D printed some knobs that'll hold it on. So after that, we're just going to shoot it. So for this one, I poured up like a crayfish color that I thought in my head it was like a dark red. It's a brick, it's called. It's from Dead On Plastics. They have a color in it called brick. It's kind of like a dark red with some brown essentially in it already for you. And I thought that was a really nice looking crayfish color. So I put that in with some gold flake, I think, and some bronze flake is in there. It works well. The problem is it's such a large bait that you do get some dents on it because you can't really vent that out very well, especially in the way I have it designed. I think it might have been a better idea to vent down the abdomen a bit. That might have helped relieve some of the dents. But if you hold the injector in quite a while, you know, give it a couple, like 2 or 3 count, seems to help out with the dents. And I have gotten quite a few of these that have turned out really well. My only issue from a fishing standpoint with the bait is it doesn't give as much action as I thought it would. It ends up being a little bit too thick through the front part, I guess it would be the thorax of the crayfish, that it doesn't give it enough kind of like wobble in the water. I was hoping to get a little bit more of that. I'm using the finesse plastic here from Dead On Plastics as well, and it still doesn't give a whole lot of action. The craw itself looks great. So I think as a jig trailer, this works really amazingly, and you can cut off the back part a little bit and just use the front. Gives the jig quite a bit of weight, so if you're pitching and flipping into cover, that jig drops really quick. Really like that a lot. The problem is on a Texas rig, it kind of looks almost too rigid, mechanical. So I may try and mess with this mold a little bit in the future, or try and do a reprint on it. New mold, so that's always exciting. New design. I think that's exciting anyway. I got like 5 or 6 of these things, so I'm just going to run through a whole bunch, record them right now, and then just put out the videos when I can after I get them edited. So got a couple different creature baits coming up. I got a swim bait design that finished up. Actually, swim bait from the recap video a little while ago. Reprinted that, brought it into the 3 years later category, so kind of know what I'm doing now, a little bit anyway. We still make mistakes. That's the beauty of it. You got to learn. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If this is something you're into, please consider subscribing. Maybe give the video a like. Helps me out a lot. YouTube doesn't really promote smaller channels at all. So any likes on the video help me out quite a bit. Appreciate it. Yeah, any comments or questions, put them down. I will answer them. I answer all comments all the time. Yeah. So, till the next one, keep your amps up and your filament dry.